Mark, thanks for joining us. Right, England 3-0 down after 3. The series from that regard as a contest is over. I'm not sure how confident you were going into this one, but did you think it would be finished already?
Yeah, I didn't have England winning, it has to be said. I felt perhaps that England had maybe one test victory in them down there. But having seen the way that things have played out in the first 3 test matches, it's hard to see where that victory is going to come from. Quite simply, they've been outplayed in all departments. The batting has continued to be pretty disastrous, really, as it has been for quite a long period of time. And unless Joe Root makes some sort of heroic double hundred in one of the next 2 test matches, you can't see Australia being repelled in any way. However, funny things have happened on these tours, and particularly when perhaps the series is over, the side on the receiving end can get a little bit, can relax a little bit, whilst the team having won the Ashes can perhaps relax a bit too, and that means that sometimes teams get out of it. But Australia haven't allowed England to do that in the last 2 tours, and I'm guessing that they won't be all that keen on doing so again this time.
Mark, you mentioned the batting there. In the 6 innings that England have had, they haven't reached 300 runs in any innings at all. Can you put your finger on why it's gone so wrong in that department?
Well, I mean, I mentioned it also. The reliance on Joe Root to make huge scores has become almost ridiculous now. I'm reminded of West Indies teams perhaps past, towards the back end of Brian Lara's career, where they relied very heavily on him to make runs, but there would always be other players who would chip in from time to time. Whereas in the last calendar year, anyway, I mean, he's nearly 1,200 runs ahead of the next best, who happens to be Rory Burns, who didn't even play in the last Test match. He's only scored 530, and Joe scored 1,700. So you don't have to look too much further than that for being a problem. Technically, a lot of the players are in a real mess. The debates around the way that county cricket, or the pitches, particularly in county cricket, kind of prepare players for test matches in places like Australia will rage on. However, a lot of the technical faults that the batsmen have are very basic things. Players with quirky backlifts, strange foot movements, strange setups, all these types of things are very much in contrast to the way that batsmen tend to be successful when playing on hard, true, bouncy surfaces in Australia.
Moving forward, Mark, then, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Who would your 2 openers be?
Well, I mean, there's an issue there too, because, Burns has been perhaps England's most consistent player in county cricket at the top of the order for quite some time. You've got sort of young players like Rob Yates from Warwickshire, who's been very impressive. But one of England's issues has been over the last, probably even over the last decade, is that you keep throwing in all these young guys who are trying to learn on the job at Test match level. Nobody who's made a debut since Joe Root has averaged more than 32, I think, as a batsman for England. And in some cases there is probably a cause to say, look, let's go back to some of the guys who've had a go before. Somebody like Adam Lyth, who's now in sort of like the prime years of his career, 30 plus. You've got someone like Sam Robson, who's made hundreds at the top of the order for England before, albeit 3 or 4 years ago now. A lot of those players will be better players for their extra experience than they were when they were in their mid to young 20s. So, sometimes you have to go backwards to go forwards. I mean, as far as I was concerned, I made my debut for England playing in 1997 in the Ashes at the age of 24. I then was out of the side for a year and a half, came back as a 29-year-old and averaged 40 from that moment on as a Test match player, sort of in my prime years around 21 to 32. So look, it sometimes the easy thing to do or the romantic thing to do is look for youth and try and think that all these young guys are going to come in and dig you out of it. I think English players develop later than players around elsewhere around the world. Reasons behind that are pretty myriad. But for English players, certainly that extra maturity can be very helpful for them.
And there's clearly pressure on the batters. There's also pressure, it would appear, on the head coach, Chris Silverwood. We had Nick Compton on earlier, who had said that he didn't think Silverwood was the man in the first place. He actually said it should have been Gary Kirsten. Is he the man still? Does he deserve more time, just like some of the players do? Or is it time for a change either now or at the end of the series?
Well, at the moment, you know, the guys at the top in the dressing room anyway, are sort of presiding over what looks to be a terminal slide. You know, the players don't seem to get any better when they're in the environment, and the team's results certainly aren't getting any better. As for Chris Silverwood, he's been given an extraordinary amount of power as the head coach, because he's also head selector, chief selector, which is utter nonsense. I said at the time when they amalgamated the two jobs, they got rid of Ed Smith as the chief selector, and then gave the extra job to Chris Silverwood. So you've got a guy in the dressing room who's also responsible for the selection of the players, also responsible for trying to run the team. And that is just completely and utterly unsustainable. Whether or not the messaging from him now is now starting to fall upon deaf ears, and he's sort of isn't able to influence any sort of positive change in the dressing room, is something that they will know only in there. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if there's a freshen up of the man at the top. As far as Joe Root is concerned, you'd have to look around and think, well, who would you give the captaincy to? I mean, I've been thinking of some names of people who possibly might take over. Ben Stokes is clearly one, but Ben Stokes is England's sort of premier all-rounder, playing in all three formats of the game. Is it really going to be beneficial to his performances as a player to also take on the extra load as the captain? He might say yes. The history suggests that is a very difficult task to undertake. Just ask Andrew Flintoff. And then you're looking at people who are outside the team altogether. James Vincent's another batter who perhaps is in the prime run-scoring time of his career. He's a captain of Hampshire County Cricket Club, so he has experience of leading teams, albeit in very different circumstances if you're going to captain your country. And so you'd almost be looking outside of the current crop of players for somebody to come in and lead the team. What England needs at this particular point in time, because there are so many issues here that are not just confined to the people who are in the side itself. It is somebody like Nasser Hussain, as he did back in the late 1990s, who came in and basically demanded changes of the first-class system, demanded of the ECB that he get what he wanted in terms of the way that players are able to prepare and play from the first-class game, and then was able to select players on character and what he thought were going to come in and stop the bleeding, basically, and be able to then build a team from there. Who is strong enough to have that sort of character around at the moment? I have no idea, I'm afraid. I can't help you out with that one.
Well, let's just hope we're not going back to those days where you did that absolutely brilliant documentary about when English cricket was really, really struggling. Let's hope we're not going back to that. But Mark, thanks very much for your time.